So today we're going to be talking a little bit about the turnspit dog, which is a very underrepresented breed of dog that was used for labor. The turnspit dog would be put in this little wheel next to the fire. They would run, pulleys would move, and it would turn the spit over the fire. The English believed that the only good way to eat meat was if it was turned over a spit. So eventually these dogs rose into incredible popularity, but that is not before they came from humble origins. The turnspit dog was used in medieval times in large kitchens, castles, palaces, and inns. During the mid-16th century, and especially their purpose came to the height in the 17th century, they became incredibly commonplace. Every household pretty much would have a turnspit dog or more than one. The turnspit dog is actually one of the first examples we have of dogs being bred specifically for human purposes. This is often attributed to René Descartes. They said he had this little dog named Monsieur Grat, and though he loved this dog, he did breed the dog, and it is said that that is the dog that was the first ancestor of the turnspit dog. You may also hear the turnspit dog referred to as the venerator cur, or the tumbling dog, or the dizzy dog. They were pretty much only used as working animals. As you can see in the picture on the left, the creepy little lion thing is actually supposed to be a representation of a turnspit dog. They were considered incredibly ugly and antisocial, and so no one wanted them as pets. I mean, their behavior is incredibly valid considering the work that they were forced to do. So, why the dog? In the case specifically of the turnspit dog, they were very strong, very sturdy, and as I said, they didn't make very suitable pets, so it was perfectly sensible to put them to work. But not just this dog in particular. Dogs were often used as sort of sacrificial for dangerous jobs. It was really commonly believed that, just like a lot of animals from the Western perspective, that they didn't really have souls, that they weren't sentient, and that their lives were essentially pretty meaningless because they didn't have an internal life. On the right here, you'll see the mandrake hunting dog, which was a medieval practice where the mandrake root was very highly medicinal and it was very rare, and so they made this like scream when they were pulled from the ground, and it was theorized, it was believed that when you pulled it from the ground and you heard it scream, you would go mad or die, and in order to save humans from this fate, they would get the dogs to do it, because so what if the dog dies? The work itself that the turnspit dog was forced to do was incredibly cruel. It was very common during this time period to have non-human labor, so animals doing lots of work, because this was pre-industrial revolution and there were lots of jobs that human beings just did not have the strength, the drive, the resolve, or what have you to do these very, very laborious jobs. The turnspit dog is one of the most important examples of a working dog, or a working animal in general. These animals were found in almost every single household, especially in England, and they were running on this wheel for hours and hours. It would take 4 hours, a little bit, give or take, to roast a joint of meat. Families or businesses would have up to 8 turnspit dogs that they would rotate in and out, so that because they would be worked to the bone, they couldn't stop, they couldn't rest. And according to Sarah Albee, this is actually where the term "every dog has its day" comes in, because they would be forced to work on very specific days so that they didn't die of exhaustion. Aside from those days where they weren't working, they didn't really have days off. They didn't really receive love because they weren't pets, which is very sad. And this sort of dog running on the wheel, turning it for a purpose, was a very easily adapted technology. It was used, as I said, for heavy manual labor jobs such as fruit pressing, grain milling, well water raising, churning butter, and they even invented dog-powered sewing machines, knife sharpeners, and bicycles that used the same technology. These dogs were beaten as well. They were harassed, beaten, negatively reinforced, just as the turnspit dog was. But the career of the turnspit dog was far more cruel than any of its counterparts. The turnspit dog replaced lowly child workers. Turning the spit was considered to be the worst job in the entire kitchen. These children were called scullions or turnbroachers, and they would be standing there with their hand close to this fire on this metal pole. They would be injured. They couldn't do it for very long. So they were replaced by the turnspit dog. According to the Life and Times of Turnspit Dogs, a paradigmatic case of animal labor in early modern industrial production, the reason why dogs were suitable for this job was based on a theory by Gomez Pereira in 1554 that dogs lacked sensory perception. They lacked souls. They had no sentience. They couldn't reflect. They couldn't predict. They didn't have feelings. And that they were sort of automated, that they were part of a machine. And this thought was implemented when they were using turnspit dogs in the kitchen. They were just part of the kitchen machinery. They were just a tool. They were not alive, and their lives mattered not at all. Descartes, as I mentioned earlier, played a really big part in sort of pushing forward this belief. He believed that it wasn't cruel to animals, but indulgent of humans to not do the labor themselves and have the dogs do it. And like a lot of things, humans believed that since dogs couldn't say that they weren't happy, that they were happy, and that as humans had this power of speech, they could enact this power over dogs, and they had a God-given right to train them and force them to do whatever they believed. And this theory was sort of used the same way when we were considering human labor and slavery, especially during the Industrial Revolution, the way that children and other individuals were worked in factories. And it was also a theory that comes from Kant that a docile dog, a docile worker is the only way that the work will ever truly get done. That's the way that you control, that's the way you teach a dog, is you make them docile. And one of the ways that they did this and they made the turnspit dogs docile and good workers was they only trained them through negative reinforcement. They'd put the dog in the wheel, and if it wouldn't run, they would throw hot coals in. The faster the dog ran, the faster the coal would catch up to it, and if it ran too slow, it would be burning them right away anyway. So it taught them to run at the perfect speed, and it even became a common belief that it was not classy, it was not humble to consume meat that wasn't turned by a turnspit dog because it wasn't cooked perfectly, and throwing these coals in there taught the dogs to cook the meat just right. And as we have seen in a lot of the cases of animal labor that we've been studying so far, is it sort of became an extinct profession. The venerator cur was switched out by the clockwork jack, which was essentially a mechanized version of exactly what the dog was doing. And since turnspit dogs were not considered suitable for house pets even during the time of Queen Victoria, which is when they went extinct, they were too ugly, they were too antisocial, no one wanted them as pets, and so they started to go extinct, and then people started using them for a very brief period of time. They had a mild resurgence where they were used as smoke jacks to clear smokes from chimneys, but that soon became unimportant as well, and they went extinct. There was no longer a purpose for them, and they no longer had a place in the world. And the only real reference we have as to what they might have looked like is this taxidermied dog, which is not a very good taxidermy, but it's in the Abergavenny Museum. And this is a turnspit dog. Her name is Whiskey, and she was taxidermied when she died, and it is the only proof we have at all of what they might have looked like. Perhaps to make the plight of the turnspit dog a little bit more personal, their closest modern ancestor is the corgi. This is my sister's corgi. Her name is Remy. Would you ever put her in a wheel and make her work by the fire? No, absolutely not. But luckily for us, this belief that dogs are not sentient and have no souls and no thoughts, and that they don't deserve care and love is something that has all but phased out of existence. So what should we be taking away here? The turnspit dog was very easily and established just as easily discarded due to public conceptions about animals, especially dogs. And if we think about it this way, a lot of modern animal work is based on the same general principles as was the justifications for working the turnspit dog. So thinking about the turnspit dog, we can look on the working animals that we have now and see where there is overlap, and where there is overlap is the things that we want to get rid of, because this is the prime example of incredibly unethical working animals. And dogs are very versatile animals, and they serve well even under awful conditions. And this was the earliest form of breeding dogs for human use, and I think that's really important. And that's something that we should think about, is the reason why dogs were originally bred for use was to do an act so cruel and so dangerous. And I just think that the story of the turnspit dog should help us reevaluate the way we perceive modern working animals. And I've attached a link here to the Kitchen Sisters podcast, which I used as a reference for a lot of this presentation. They do a really good job of explaining the turnspit dog, so give that a listen if you please. And here are my sources, and that's all.